You know, they say money changes people, but I never thought I'd see the day when my own daughter would look at me with such disgust that it would shatter my heart into a million pieces. What I'm about to tell you is the most painful story of my life, but also the most liberating one. By the end of this, you'll understand why I made a decision that shocked everyone who knew me, including myself. And if you think this is just another story about family drama, you're wrong. This is about something much deeper, something that will make you question everything you think you know about love, loyalty, and what we truly owe our children. My name is Robert, and I'm 72 years old. I've lived through decades of hard work, sacrifice, and building a fortune that I thought would secure my family's future for generations. But sometimes, the very thing you work hardest for becomes the thing that destroys what you love most. And if you think you know how this story ends, trust me, you don't. Because what happened in that restaurant 6 months ago didn't just change my will, it changed my entire understanding of what it means to be a father, and what it means to leave a legacy. Let me take you back to where it all began, because understanding my past is crucial to understanding why I made the decision that would ultimately save my soul, even as it broke my heart. I wasn't born into money. Far from it. My father was a coal miner, and my mother cleaned houses to make ends meet. I grew up in a small mining town in West Virginia, where having holes in your shoes was normal, and dreaming big was considered foolish. But I had something that money couldn't buy: determination that burned like fire in my chest, and a vision of a different life that kept me awake at night. I remember being 8 years old, sitting in our tiny kitchen with wallpaper peeling off the walls, watching my mother count and recount the few crumpled bills we had for groceries. She would lay them out on the scratched wooden table, her calloused hands trembling slightly as she tried to make the numbers work. We needed $47 for groceries that week, and we had 33. I watched her face crumple with worry, saw her bite her lip to keep from crying, and something inside me broke and hardened at the same time. That night, I made a promise to myself that I would never let my family struggle like that. I would work harder than anyone, sacrifice more than anyone, and build something that would last. I would create a fortress of financial security so strong that no one I loved would ever have to count crumpled bills on a kitchen table again. Little did I know that this promise would both make and destroy everything I held dear. The very next day, I started looking for ways to make money. I was 8 years old, mind you, but I was determined. I collected bottles for the 5-cent deposit. I helped neighbors with their yard work for pocket change. And I even started a small business selling drawings to my classmates for a nickel each. My parents thought it was cute, this little boy's entrepreneurial spirit, but for me, it was deadly serious. Every penny I earned was a step away from that kitchen table, a step toward a future where money would never be a source of fear. I started working officially at 12, delivering newspapers before school, and washing dishes at a local diner after school, while other kids played baseball or watched television. I was calculating how many papers I needed to deliver to save $10, how many dishes I needed to wash to afford a new pair of shoes. While they dreamed of toys and games, I dreamed of investments and opportunities. I dreamed of the day when I would have enough money to solve any problem, to protect anyone I loved from the kind of worry I saw in my mother's eyes. By the time I was 16, I had saved enough money to buy my first car, not for luxury, but for business. I could deliver more papers, take on more jobs, expand my small empire of determination. My classmates thought I was crazy, working all the time, never going to parties or dating, but I had a vision that sustained me through every sacrifice, every missed opportunity, every moment of loneliness. By the time I was 18, I had saved enough to buy my first rental property, a rundown house on the wrong side of town that I got for a fraction of its potential value. I fixed it up with my own hands, working until my fingers bled and my back screamed in pain. I learned plumbing from library books, electrical work from YouTube videos before YouTube existed. I learned from anyone who would teach me. I painted every wall, replaced every fixture, and turned that broken down house into a home that someone would be proud to live in. But here's what I want you to understand, and this is crucial to everything that follows. I didn't just work for money, I worked for love. Every nail I hammered, every wall I painted, every sleepless night I spent planning my next move was driven by the vision of giving my future family everything I never had. I wanted them to have choices, opportunities, and most importantly, security. I wanted them to sleep peacefully at night, knowing that their father had built something strong enough to protect them from the world's uncertainties. When I was 22, I owned 3 rental properties and was starting to make real money. But I still lived like a poor man, still drove my beat-up truck, still wore my work clothes everywhere I went. People thought I was crazy, that I was hoarding money like some kind of miser. But they didn't understand that every dollar I saved was a dollar I could invest in the future. A dollar that could grow into $10, then $100, then $1,000. I wasn't accumulating money for the sake of having money. I was building a legacy, creating a foundation that would support generations of my family. I was constructing something that would outlast my own life, something that would give my children and their children opportunities I never had. And I was doing it all while maintaining the values my parents had taught me. Work hard, treat people fairly, and never forget where you came from. When I met Margaret, my late wife, I was 25 and owned 7 rental properties. She was working as a nurse at the county hospital, and I'll never forget the first time I saw her. She was helping an elderly man who had fallen outside the hospital where she worked. She didn't just help him up. She sat with him on the sidewalk until his family arrived, holding his hand and talking to him like he was her own grandfather. She gave him her sweater when he started shivering and made sure he was comfortable before she would even think about going back to her own duties. I watched this scene unfold from across the street, and I knew in that moment that I had found someone special. This woman, this beautiful, compassionate woman, understood what I understood, that how you treat people, especially people who can't do anything for you, reveals who you really are. She saw past the surface to the humanity underneath, and she responded with kindness and grace. It took me 3 weeks to work up the courage to ask her out. I was terrified that she would judge me for my appearance, for my beat-up truck, for my rough hands and simple clothes. But when I finally approached her, she looked at me with such warmth and interest that I knew I had worried for nothing. She agreed to go to dinner with me, and I took her to a small diner where I knew the food was good and the prices were reasonable. That night, I told her about my dreams, my plans, my vision for the future. I told her about my parents, about that night in the kitchen when I made my promise to myself, about the empire I was building one property at a time. I expected her to be impressed by my ambition, maybe even a little intimidated by my success. Instead, she asked me something that no one had ever asked me before. But Robert, who are you when you're not working? Who are you when you're not building, or planning, or saving? Who are you, just as a person? The question stunned me because I realized I didn't know how to answer it. I had been so focused on becoming successful, on building wealth and security, that I had forgotten to develop myself as a human being. I had forgotten to think about what kind of person I wanted to be, apart from what kind of businessman I wanted to become. Margaret helped me discover that other side of myself. She showed me that success without humanity is meaningless, that wealth without character is worthless. She taught me to see people not as potential customers or business connections, but as individuals with their own stories, their own struggles, their own dreams. She helped me understand that the values my parents had instilled in me, kindness, humility, hard work, respect for others, were not obstacles to success, but the very foundation of meaningful success. Margaret and I got married 2 years later, and I continued building my real estate empire. But now, I was building it with a different understanding of why it mattered. I wasn't just accumulating wealth for its own sake. I was creating something that would allow me to take care of the people I loved, to contribute to my community, and to leave the world a little better than I found it. But I never forgot my roots. Even as my bank account grew, I kept wearing my old work clothes, driving my beat-up truck, and eating at the same small diners where I used to wash dishes. Margaret understood this about me. She knew that staying humble wasn't just a choice for me, it was a necessity. It kept me grounded, and reminded me why I was working so hard. It connected me to the boy who had made that promise in his mother's kitchen, and it reminded me that no matter how much money I made, I was still fundamentally the same person. When our daughter Emily was born, I thought my heart would explode with love. I held this tiny perfect human in my arms and made the same promise I had made to myself as a child. She would never want for anything, but I also promised her something else. Something I thought was just as important. She would understand the value of hard work and humility. She would know that money was a tool, not a goal, and that character was more valuable than any bank account. For the first few years of Emily's life, everything was perfect. Margaret and I raised her in a modest home, even though we could afford much more. We wanted her to have a normal childhood, to make friends based on who she was, not what she had. We wanted her to learn empathy and kindness, to understand that not everyone had the advantages she had, and to feel grateful for what she had rather than entitled to it. We taught her to say please and thank you, to help others when she could, and to never look down on anyone because of their circumstances. We volunteered together at the local food bank, and Emily would help pack groceries for families in need. She would ask thoughtful questions about why some people didn't have enough food, and we would talk about the importance of helping others and being grateful for what we had. I remember one Christmas when Emily was 6 years old. We had taken her to pick out toys to donate to children who wouldn't otherwise have Christmas presents. Emily had been excited about the trip, but when we got to the toy store, she became very quiet. She kept looking at all the toys, picking them up and putting them back down, clearly struggling with something. Finally, she looked up at me with those big brown eyes and said, "Daddy, can we buy extra toys? I want to make sure every kid gets something really special." She had brought her own piggy bank money, all $7.34 of it, because she wanted to contribute to the cause. That moment, watching my 6-year-old daughter sacrifice her own spending money to help children she had never met, I thought I had succeeded as a father. I thought I had raised a child who understood what really mattered in life. But as Emily grew older and my wealth became more apparent, things started to change. It was subtle at first, so subtle that I almost missed it. She began noticing that her friends' parents drove nicer cars, lived in bigger houses, and went on more expensive vacations. She started asking questions. Why don't we live in a mansion like the Johnsons? Why don't you wear suits like other dads? Why do you always look like you just came from a construction site? I tried to explain to her that appearances didn't matter, that what mattered was character and kindness. I told her stories about my childhood, about learning the value of hard work and staying humble. But I could see something shifting in her eyes. The admiration I used to see when she looked at me was slowly being replaced by something else. Something that made my stomach turn and my heart ache. At first, I thought it was just a phase. Kids go through stages where they're embarrassed by their parents. It's normal, natural, part of growing up. But this felt different. This felt like she was starting to see me not as someone to be proud of, but as someone to be ashamed of. She was starting to judge me by the same superficial standards that I had spent my whole life rejecting. Margaret tried to help bridge the gap between Emily and me, but as Emily entered her teenage years, the divide only grew wider. She became increasingly embarrassed by my appearance, by my old truck, by the way I spoke. She started making excuses. When her friends wanted to meet me, saying I was busy or out of town, each excuse felt like a small knife twisting in my heart. I remember one particularly painful incident when Emily was 14. She had been invited to a birthday party at one of her classmates' houses, and I had volunteered to drive her there. When we pulled up to the house, a massive mansion in the most expensive part of town, Emily made me park 3 blocks away. "I'll walk from here," she said, not meeting my eyes. "Emily, it's raining," I protested. "Let me at least drop you off at the front door." "No, Dad, please, I'll be fine." She was already opening the car door, clearly desperate to get away from me in my beat-up truck. I watched her walk through the rain, her shoulders hunched against the weather and against the shame she felt about her father. I sat in that truck for a long time, watching her disappear into that mansion, wondering where I had gone wrong. I had given her everything I thought she needed, but somehow, I had failed to give her the most important thing, the ability to value people for who they are, not what they appear to be. The teenage years were difficult for all of us. Emily was pulling away from Margaret and me, becoming increasingly focused on appearances and social status. She wanted designer clothes, expensive gadgets, and all the trappings of wealth that I had deliberately avoided. She seemed to resent the fact that we lived modestly, that I drove an old truck, that I wore work clothes instead of expensive suits. Margaret and I tried to maintain family traditions, to keep Emily connected to our values and our love for her. We still volunteered together, though Emily participated with increasing reluctance. We still had family dinners, though Emily often seemed distracted and impatient. We still talked about the importance of character and kindness, though I could see that our words were falling on deaf ears. But I held on to hope. I believed that Emily's behavior was just teenage rebellion, that she would grow out of it and, eventually, understand the lessons we had tried to teach her. I believed that the little girl who had wanted to buy extra Christmas presents for needy children was still there, somewhere underneath the surface, waiting to emerge. The real breaking point came when Emily was in college. I had worked my entire life to pay for her education, and she was studying at one of the most prestigious universities in the country. I was so proud of her academic achievements, so excited to see her succeeding in her studies. But when I would visit her on campus, I could see the shame in her eyes when she introduced me to her friends. She would present me quickly, almost apologetically, as if she were embarrassed by my very existence. Her friends were all from wealthy families, and their parents drove luxury cars and wore expensive clothes. Next to them, I looked like exactly what I was, a working-class man who had built his fortune through hard work and determination. But instead of being proud of that accomplishment, Emily seemed to see it as a source of shame. One particularly painful memory stands out from her sophomore year. I had driven for hours to surprise Emily for her birthday, bringing her favorite homemade cake that Margaret had taught me to make. It was a tradition we had started when Emily was little. I would make her birthday cake from scratch, decorating it with whatever theme she was interested in that year. This year, I had made a beautiful chocolate cake with vanilla frosting, decorated with little books and graduation caps, because she had been doing so well in her pre-law program. I was wearing my usual work clothes because I had come straight from checking on one of my properties where we were doing some repairs. My jeans were clean but worn, my boots were scuffed but comfortable, and my flannel shirt was soft from years of washing. These clothes were like a second skin to me, comfortable and familiar. They represented who I was and where I had come from. When I found Emily in the campus cafe with her friends, her face turned red with embarrassment. She was sitting at a table with 3 other students, all of them dressed in what looked like very expensive clothes. They were discussing their spring break plans, trips to Europe, luxury resorts, exclusive destinations that cost more than most people make in a year. Emily saw me approaching, and I watched her face transform. First, there was a moment of genuine happiness. She was surprised and pleased to see me. But then, as she took in my appearance and glanced around at her friends, that happiness was replaced by something else, something that made my heart sink. She quickly introduced me to her friends, but her voice was strained, almost apologetic. "Everyone, this is my dad. Dad, these are my friends from school." She didn't say anything about the cake I was carrying, didn't mention that I had driven for hours to surprise her, didn't acknowledge the effort I had made to be there for her birthday. Her friends were polite but distant, clearly judging me based on my appearance. I could see them exchanging glances, could feel their assessment of me as someone who didn't belong in their world. But I was focused on Emily, on the pain I could see in her eyes, not pain for me, but pain about me. She was in pain because she was embarrassed by her own father. After a few minutes of awkward conversation, Emily pulled me aside. "Dad, why couldn't you at least change clothes before coming here? You look like a janitor," she whispered harshly. Glancing around to make sure none of her friends could hear, those words hit me like a physical blow. I looked down at my clothes. These comfortable, familiar clothes that had been with me through every important moment of my life. I had worn clothes just like these when I bought my first property, when I married Margaret, when Emily was born. They were part of who I was, part of my identity and my history. "Emily, these are just clothes," I said quietly. "I'm still the same person who loves you, who worked to pay for your education, who drove 4 hours to bring you a birthday cake." But she wasn't hearing me. She was too focused on what her friends might think, too worried about how my appearance might reflect on her. "You don't understand, Dad. This isn't just about clothes. It's about plows. It's about fitting in, about belonging. When you show up looking like this, it makes me look bad." I stood there holding her birthday cake, feeling like the ground was shifting beneath my feet. This was my daughter, the little girl I had loved and sacrificed for, telling me that I made her look bad. Not my actions, not my words, not my character, my appearance. The way I looked was more important to her than who I was, or what I had done for her. I mumbled something about being proud of her, and left the cake on the table before walking out. I sat in my truck for an hour, trying to process what had just happened. My daughter was ashamed of me, not because I had done anything wrong, not because I had failed to provide for her, but because I didn't look the way she thought I should look. That night, I called Margaret and told her what had happened. She was heartbroken, but she also defended Emily, saying she was just young and would grow out of it. "She loves you, Robert," Margaret said, her voice thick with tears. "She just doesn't understand yet that your clothes don't define who you are. She's young, she's trying to find her place in the world, and sometimes young people make mistakes." But I couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just a mistake. This felt like a fundamental shift in Emily's character, a change in her values that went deeper than typical teenage rebellion. She was becoming someone who valued appearances over substance, someone who was willing to hurt the people who loved her in order to maintain her social standing. Over the next few months, Emily and I continued to drift apart. Our phone calls became less frequent and more strained. When she did call, she rarely asked about my life or my work. She would talk about her classes, her friends, her social activities. But there was an emotional distance that hadn't been there before. It was as if she was performing the role of a daughter rather than actually being one. Margaret tried to bridge the gap between us, but it was becoming increasingly difficult. Emily would visit home during breaks, but she always seemed restless and eager to leave. She would make plans with her high school friends, but she rarely included us in those plans. She was polite but distant, present but not really there. I started to wonder if I had made mistakes in raising her. Had I been too focused on providing for her financially and not focused enough on instilling character? Had I failed to teach her the values that Margaret and I held dear? Had my own success somehow corrupted her, made her believe that wealth and status were more important than kindness and humility? But then I would remember the little girl who had wanted to buy extra Christmas presents for needy children, and I would think that surely, that compassionate child was still there somewhere. I would remember the daughter who used to run to me with scraped knees and broken toys, trusting that Daddy could fix anything, and I would believe that our relationship could be repaired. Margaret passed away 3 years later after a brief battle with cancer. Her death devastated both Emily and me, but it also seemed to create an even wider chasm between us. Without Margaret as the bridge between our two worlds, Emily and I struggled to connect on any meaningful level. The funeral was the last time I remember Emily looking at me with anything resembling love or respect. During Margaret's illness, Emily had been supportive and loving, the daughter I remembered from her childhood. She had taken time off from her new job to help care for her mother, and she had shown genuine emotion and compassion. For a brief moment, I thought that maybe Margaret's illness had reminded Emily of what was really important in life. But after the funeral, after the immediate crisis had passed, Emily seemed to retreat back into her shell of superficiality and social climbing. She had graduated from law school by then and was working at a prestigious firm in the city. She was making good money and living in an expensive apartment, surrounding herself with the kind of people who valued the same things she had come to value: appearance, status, and wealth. After Margaret's death, Emily's attitude toward me became even more cold and distant. She would call occasionally, but our conversations were brief and superficial. She would ask about my health in a perfunctory way, but she never asked about my feelings, my grief, or how I was coping with the loss of the love of my life. I tried to reach out to her, to bridge the gap that had grown between us. I invited her to visit, suggested we take a trip together, offered to help her with anything she might need. But she always had excuses. She was too busy with work. She had social obligations. She was planning a vacation with friends. It was clear that spending time with her grieving father was not a priority for her. But I kept hoping, kept believing that somewhere inside this polished, sophisticated woman was the little girl who used to run to me with scraped knees and broken toys, trusting that Daddy could fix anything. I kept hoping that time would heal whatever had broken between us, that maturity would help her understand the values Margaret and I had tried to instill in her. I spent many lonely nights in the years after Margaret's death, sitting in our empty house, looking through photo albums and remembering better times. I would stare at pictures of Emily as a child, trying to understand where I had gone wrong, trying to figure out how to repair our relationship. I would remember Margaret's words about Emily being young and making mistakes, and I would cling to the hope that someday my daughter would come back to me. About 6 months ago, I decided to take a step that I thought might help repair our relationship. I had been thinking about it for weeks, working up the courage to reach out to Emily and try to reconnect with her. I called her and asked if she would meet me for lunch. She seemed surprised by the invitation, but she reluctantly agreed. We arranged to meet at an upscale restaurant in her city, a place she had mentioned enjoying. I thought that by meeting her on her turf, in the kind of environment she was comfortable in, we might be able to have a meaningful conversation. I was nervous but hopeful. Maybe this would be the conversation that brought us back together. I chose to wear what I always wear: my comfortable jeans, work boots, and a flannel shirt that had seen better days. These clothes were like armor for me, a reminder of who I was and where I came from. They connected me to my past, to my values, to the man I had worked so hard to become. I had no idea that this choice would lead to the most humiliating moment of my life. When I walked into the restaurant, I immediately felt out of place. It was one of those establishments where everything was polished and perfect, where the waiters wore suits and the wine cost more than most people make in a day. The hostess looked me up and down with barely concealed disdain, her eyes taking in my worn jeans and scuffed boots with obvious disapproval. "Do you have a reservation?" she asked, her tone suggesting that she doubted someone like me could afford to eat at a place like this. "Yes, I'm meeting my daughter. The reservation is under Robert Mitchell." She checked her list and then looked at me again, clearly skeptical. "Right this way, sir," she said, leading me to a corner table that was partially hidden from the main dining room. I realized she was trying to minimize my visibility, to keep me away from the other diners who might be offended by my appearance. I sat at the table, feeling uncomfortable and out of place, but trying to focus on the reason I was there. I was going to see my daughter, to try to rebuild our relationship. I was going to tell her how much I missed her, how sorry I was that we had grown apart, and how much I loved her despite everything that had happened between us. I waited for Emily, checking my watch and rehearsing what I wanted to say to her. I wanted to tell her about my grief over losing Margaret, about how lonely I had been, about how much I needed her in my life. I wanted to ask her to help me understand what had gone wrong between us, and to work together to fix it. When Emily finally arrived, 30 minutes late, she looked stunning. She was wearing an expensive designer dress, perfect makeup, and jewelry that probably cost more than my truck. Her hair was styled perfectly, and she carried herself with the confidence of someone who was used to being admired and envied. For a moment, I was so proud of how successful and beautiful she had become. She had achieved everything I had dreamed of for her: a prestigious education, a successful career, financial independence. She was living the life I had worked so hard to make possible for her. But then I saw her face when she spotted me sitting at the table. The look of horror and disgust that crossed her features was unmistakable. She stood frozen in the entrance for several seconds, and I could see her debating whether to turn around and leave. Her eyes scanned the restaurant, clearly worried about who might see her with me. But she composed herself and walked over to the table, her heels clicking against the marble floor like a countdown to disaster. She sat down across from me, her movements stiff and controlled, her face a mask of barely contained embarrassment. "Dad, what are you wearing?" she hissed as soon as she was seated, glancing around to see if anyone was watching us. "I can't believe you came to a place like this, dressed like like that." I looked down at my clothes, these comfortable, familiar clothes that were part of who I was. "Emily, these are just clothes. I'm still your father, and I love you. I've missed you so much." She cut me off with a gesture, her face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "You don't understand, Dad. Look around. Look at where we are. This is a place for successful people, for people who matter, and you show up looking like you're about to fix someone's plumbing. I tried to explain that clothes didn't define a person, that I was still the same man who had worked his entire life to give her opportunities, who had sacrificed everything to ensure her success. But she wasn't listening. She was too focused on what the other diners might think, too worried about how my appearance might reflect on her. But then she did something that changed everything. She laughed. Not a joyful laugh, not even a nervous laugh, but a cruel, mocking laugh that echoed through the restaurant and seemed to pierce right through my soul. It was a laugh that said I was ridiculous, that I was embarrassing, that I was someone to be ashamed of rather than proud of. "You're embarrassing," she said, shaking her head as if she couldn't believe what she was dealing with. "Look around, Dad, look at where we are. This is a place for successful people, for people who matter. And you show up looking like you're about to fix someone's plumbing." That laugh, that cruel, heartless laugh, was the moment everything changed for me. It was the moment I realized that the daughter I had worked my entire life to provide for, the daughter I had sacrificed everything for, was gone. In her place sat a stranger who valued appearances over love, status over character, and money over family. But what happened next was even worse. Emily continued talking, and with each word, she revealed just how far she had fallen from the values Margaret and I had tried to instill in her. She talked about her friends, her lifestyle, her expectations for the future. She described her social circle, people who judged others based on their clothes and cars and bank accounts. And then she started talking about my money. "I know you're worth millions, Dad," she said, her voice taking on a calculating tone that made my skin crawl. "And I know that someday, all of that will be mine. But until then, couldn't you at least try to look the part? Couldn't you buy some decent clothes, get a nice car, maybe join a country club?" I sat there in stunned silence, watching this person who shared my DNA but seemed to share none of my values. She had reduced our entire relationship to money and appearances. She wasn't interested in who I was as a person, in my stories, my experiences, or my love for her. She was only interested in what I could give her and how my appearance might reflect on her. "It's embarrassing to have to explain to people why my father looks like he's homeless," she continued, her voice getting louder and more agitated. "Dude, you know what it's like to have friends who live in mansions and drive luxury cars, and then have to introduce them to a father who looks like he works at a gas station." Each word was like a knife to my heart. This was my daughter, the little girl I had loved and protected and provided for, talking about me like I was something to be ashamed of. She wasn't seeing Robert Mitchell, the man who had built a real estate empire from nothing. She wasn't seeing the father who had worked 18-hour days to pay for her education. She was seeing only the surface, only the clothes and the appearance, and finding it lacking. But then something beautiful happened in that moment of absolute darkness. Our waitress, a young woman who couldn't have been much older than Emily, approached our table. She had clearly overheard at least part of our conversation, and I expected her to be uncomfortable or judgmental. Instead, she looked at me with kindness and respect. "Excuse me, sir," she said quietly, her voice gentle and sincere. "I don't mean to interrupt, but I wanted to say that your daughter is very lucky to have a father who cares enough to come all this way to see her. My dad works construction, and he wears clothes just like yours. He's the hardest working, most honest man I know, and I'm proud of him every single day." The waitress's words hit me like a bolt of lightning. Here was someone who didn't know me, who had no reason to defend me, but who understood something that my own daughter had forgotten: that a person's worth isn't measured by their clothes or their car or their appearance. It's measured by their character, their actions, and their love for others. Emily's face turned red with anger and embarrassment. "This is a private conversation," she snapped at the waitress. "Could you please just do your job and leave us alone?" But the waitress didn't back down. She stood her ground with quiet dignity, looking at Emily with a mixture of pity and disappointment. "I'm sorry if I overstepped," she said, still looking at me with respect. "It's just that some of us understand that clothes don't make the man. Character does." As the waitress walked away, Emily exploded with fury. "Great, now even the help is lecturing me about my own father. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Dad, your appearance invites comments from people who have no business judging our family. You're making us both look bad." But I wasn't listening to Emily anymore. I was watching the waitress, this young woman who had shown more character and kindness in 30 seconds than my daughter had shown in years. I was thinking about what she had said about her father, about how proud she was of him despite his work, clothes, and calloused hands. That's when I knew what I had to do. The decision crystallized in my mind with perfect clarity. I had spent my entire life working for someone who didn't exist anymore. The Emily I had loved and sacrificed for was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize and frankly didn't like very much. I stood up from the table and called the waitress over. "What's your name, dear?" I asked her. "Sarah," she replied, looking confused but still kind. "Sarah, I want you to know that what you said took courage, and it meant more to me than you'll ever know." Your father raised you right, and he should be proud of the woman you've become. Then I turned to Emily, who was staring at me with a mixture of confusion and growing alarm. You're right about one thing, I said, my voice steady despite the emotion I was feeling. I am worth millions. I've worked my entire life to build that wealth, and I always assumed it would go to you. But today, you've shown me that you don't deserve it. Emily's face went pale, and she gripped the edge of the table. Dad, what are you saying? I'm saying that I'm going to change my will. Every penny I've worked for, every property I've built, every investment I've made is going to people who understand the value of hard work and kindness. People like Sarah here, who work honest jobs and treat others with respect, even when those others are strangers who can't do anything for them. The restaurant had gone quiet. Other diners were listening, some with shock, others with what looked like approval. I could see people nodding slightly, understanding the gravity of what was happening. Emily looked around frantically, realizing that her private humiliation had become very public. You can't be serious, she whispered, her voice trembling with panic. I'm your daughter. That money belongs to me. I've been counting on it, planning for it. You can't just give it away to some random waitress. You stopped being my daughter the moment you chose to value money over love. I replied, my voice carrying across the quiet restaurant. That money belongs to people who deserve it, people who would use it to help others instead of just buying more expensive clothes and status symbols. I turned back to Sarah, who was standing there with tears in her eyes, clearly overwhelmed by what she was witnessing. I don't know your full story, but I can see that you're a good person. You're working hard to make an honest living, and you had the courage to speak up for what's right when you saw injustice. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. Sarah looked absolutely stunned, her hands shaking as she tried to process what was happening. Sir, I don't understand what's happening here. I was just, I was just trying to be kind. What's happening, I said, is that kindness is being rewarded. What's happening is that I'm giving you a chance to change your life, to help your family, to make a difference in the world. All I ask is that you remember where it came from and that you use it to help others when you can. Emily stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor with a sound that made everyone in the restaurant turn to look at us. This is insane. Dad, you can't just give away my inheritance to some random waitress. I'll fight this in court. I'll have you declared incompetent. You're welcome to try, I said calmly, looking at this woman who had once been my beloved daughter. But I'm not incompetent. I'm just finally seeing clearly. I've spent my whole life working for someone who turned out to be a stranger. The other diners in the restaurant were now openly staring at us, some with their phones out, clearly recording this unprecedented family drama. I could see the wheels turning in their minds, trying to process what they were witnessing. A father publicly disinheriting his daughter and giving her inheritance to a waitress. Emily's face was a mask of rage and desperation. You're doing this because I'm embarrassed by your clothes, because I don't want to be seen with someone who looks like a homeless person. That's not a reason to destroy my entire future. No, Emily, I said, my voice heavy with sadness. I'm doing this because you've shown me who you really are. You've shown me that you care more about appearances than about people. You've shown me that you would rather hurt someone who loves you than risk being embarrassed. You've shown me that you've learned nothing from the values your mother and I tried to teach you. I looked around the restaurant at all the people who were watching us, and I decided to tell them the whole truth. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry for disrupting your meals, but I want you to understand what's happening here. I'm a man who grew up poor, who worked his entire life to build wealth so that my daughter would never have to struggle the way I did. I sacrificed everything for her education, her opportunities, her future. The restaurant was completely silent now, everyone hanging on my every word. But somewhere along the way, my daughter learned to be ashamed of me. Not because I'm a bad person, not because I've done anything wrong, but because I don't look the way she thinks I should look. She's embarrassed by my work clothes, by my truck, by the fact that I still act like the working class man I've always been. I turned to look at Emily, who was standing there with tears streaming down her face. But they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of frustration and self-pity. I thought I was giving her everything she needed, but I realize now that I failed to give her the most important thing, character. I gave her money and opportunities, but I failed to give her the ability to value people for who they are rather than what they appear to be. The crowd in the restaurant was completely engaged, now some people nodding in agreement, others looking shocked by the drama unfolding before them. I could see servers from other tables gathering around, drawn by the commotion and the extraordinary nature of what was happening. So today, I'm correcting that mistake. I continued. I'm giving my wealth to someone who already has what my daughter lacks: character, kindness, and the ability to see past appearances to the person underneath. Sarah here doesn't know me from Adam, but she saw an old man being treated badly by his own daughter, and she spoke up. That's the kind of person who deserves to be rewarded. Emily was sobbing now, but still thinking only about the money. Dad, please, don't do this. I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry. I was embarrassed. I'm sorry I said those things. But please don't throw away our entire relationship over one argument. I looked at her for a long moment, searching her face for any sign of genuine understanding, any indication that she truly grasped what she had done wrong. But all I saw was someone who was sorry she had been caught. Sorry there were consequences, but not sorry for the cruelty she had shown. Emily, this isn't about one argument. This is about who you've become. This is about the fact that you can look at your father, the man who sacrificed everything for you, and feel nothing but shame and embarrassment. This is about the fact that you can be cruel to a hardworking waitress just because she dared to show me kindness. I turned to address the entire restaurant again. I want all of you to think about this moment. Think about the people in your lives who love you, who sacrifice for you, who would do anything for you. Are you grateful for them? Do you value them? Or are you embarrassed by them because they don't meet your standards of appearance or success? The silence in the restaurant was profound. People were looking at each other, clearly thinking about their own relationships, their own families, their own values. Some were nodding in agreement, others looked uncomfortable, perhaps recognizing themselves in Emily's behavior. Because, here's the truth, I continued, my voice carrying across the silent room. The people who truly love you will show up for you regardless of what you're wearing or what you're driving. They'll be there when you need them, not because of what you can give them, but because of who you are. Those are the people who deserve your love and respect in return. I looked at Sarah, who was still standing there in shock, tears streaming down her face. Sarah, I meant what I said. I'm going to change my will, and you're going to inherit the bulk of my estate. But I want you to promise me something. Sir, I don't know what to say. This is all so overwhelming. Promise me that you'll use this money to help people. Promise me that you'll remember where it came from and that you'll pass on the kindness that you showed me today. Promise me that you'll never let wealth change who you are at your core. Sarah nodded through her tears. I promise, sir, I promise, I'll use it to help people. I promise I'll never forget this moment or what you've taught me. Emily made one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation. Dad, if you do this, you'll never see me again. You'll be alone, with no family, no one who loves you. Is that really what you want? I looked at her, this beautiful, successful woman who had once been my beloved daughter, and I felt a profound sadness wash over me. Emily, I've been alone for years. Ever since you decided that who I am wasn't good enough for you, I've been alone. At least now I'll be alone with my dignity intact. The words hung in the air like a final judgment. Emily stood there for a moment, longer, perhaps waiting for me to change my mind, to take back my words, to choose her over my principles. But I didn't move, didn't speak, didn't give her the reprieve she was hoping for. Finally, she grabbed her purse and stormed out of the restaurant, leaving me standing there with Sarah and a room full of strangers who had just witnessed the most painful moment of my life. But as I watched her leave, I didn't feel regret. I felt relief. For the first time in years, I felt like I had done the right thing. The restaurant slowly came back to life, conversations resuming in hushed tones. But many people came up to me before they left, shaking my hand, telling me they respected my decision, sharing their own stories about difficult family relationships and the importance of standing up for your values. One elderly woman approached me with tears in her eyes. Young man, she said, I've been married for 57 years, and I've never seen such courage. Your daughter may not appreciate what you've done, but the rest of us do. You've reminded us all what really matters in life. A middle-aged man who had been dining with his teenage son came over to shake my hand. I hope I would have the strength to do what you just did, he said. You've given me a lot to think about regarding my own values and what I'm teaching my children. Even the restaurant staff seemed moved by what had happened. The manager came over to tell me that my meal was on the house, that what I had done had reminded everyone there of the importance of treating people with respect, regardless of their appearance or background. But it was Sarah's reaction that meant the most to me. After the crowd had dispersed and the restaurant had returned to normal, she sat down across from me at the table Emily had abandoned. Sir, I need you to know that what you did today, it wasn't just about the money. It was about dignity, about standing up for what's right, about showing that character matters more than appearances. You've changed my life, not just financially, but in ways I'm still trying to understand. Over the following weeks, I did exactly what I had promised. I contacted my lawyer and completely rewrote my will. The bulk of my estate would go to Sarah, with specific instructions for how it should be used. I set up scholarships for students from working-class families, donations to charities that help people in need, and a fund to support other hardworking service industry employees. I also made sure that Sarah would have access to financial advisors and legal counsel to help her manage her inheritance responsibly. I didn't want to just dump millions of dollars on her. I wanted to ensure that she would be able to use the money wisely and for the benefit of others. But the story doesn't end there. Word of what had happened in the restaurant spread quickly through Emily's social circle and beyond. Someone had recorded parts of our confrontation and posted it on social media, where it went viral almost immediately. The video showed Emily's cruel laughter, her dismissive treatment of Sarah, and my decision to change my will. The response was overwhelming. Thousands of people shared the video, commenting on everything from family relationships to the importance of treating service workers with respect. Some people criticized me for publicly humiliating my daughter, but the vast majority supported my decision. More importantly, the video sparked conversations about values, about what we owe our children, and about the difference between giving someone everything they want and giving them what they need. Parents wrote to me about their own struggles with entitled children, about the challenges of raising kids who understand the value of hard work and humility. Emily tried to reach out to me several times in the weeks following our lunch, but her calls and messages were always focused on the money. She never once apologized for her behavior or acknowledged that she had hurt me. She never asked about my health or my feelings. Every communication was about the inheritance and how unfair it was that I was giving it away. She hired lawyers to investigate whether she could challenge the will, but they told her the same thing my lawyers had told me. I was of sound mind, and I had every right to leave my money to whomever I chose. She even tried to have me declared incompetent, but the psychological evaluations showed that I was perfectly capable of making my own decisions. 3 months after our lunch, Emily showed up at my house unannounced. She had clearly been crying, and for a moment, I thought maybe she had come to apologize, to try to rebuild our relationship. But I was wrong. "Dad, please," she said, standing in my doorway looking desperate and disheveled. "I've been thinking about what happened, and I realize I made a mistake. I shouldn't have been so concerned about appearances. I shouldn't have laughed at you. Can we please just forget this whole thing and go back to normal?" I looked at her carefully, searching for any sign of genuine remorse or understanding. But what I saw was someone who was only sorry that her inheritance was in jeopardy. She wasn't sorry for hurting me, for disrespecting me, or for showing such cruelty to a hard-working waitress. She was only sorry that there were consequences for her actions. "Emily," I said sadly, "if you had come here to apologize for your behavior, to show me that you understood why I was hurt, we might have been able to work things out. But you're still only thinking about money. You still don't understand that what you did was wrong." She broke down crying then, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of frustration and self-pity. "But I'm your daughter," she sobbed. "Doesn't that mean anything? Doesn't the fact that I came from you, that I carry your blood, doesn't that count for something?" "Being my daughter means everything," I replied, feeling the weight of those words in my heart. "But you stopped acting like my daughter a long time ago. You became someone who values things over people, appearance over character, and money over love. I don't recognize you anymore, Emily. I don't recognize the person you've become." She tried again, her voice taking on a manipulative tone that made my stomach turn. "Dad, I know I've made mistakes, but I can change. I can be the daughter you want me to be. Just give me another chance, and I'll prove to you that I can be better." But I could see through her words to the calculation beneath them. She wasn't offering to change because she understood what she had done wrong. She was offering to change because she wanted her inheritance back. She was willing to pretend to be a different person if it meant securing her financial future. "Emily, real change doesn't happen because of external consequences. Real change happens because you recognize that your behavior is wrong and you want to be a better person. You're not sorry for what you did. You're sorry that it cost you something you wanted." Emily left that day, and I haven't seen her since. She's made several attempts to contact me through lawyers, threatening to challenge the will, but my legal team has assured me that my wishes are ironclad. She's even tried to contact Sarah, attempting to convince her to refuse the inheritance, or to share it with Emily, but Sarah has handled those approaches with grace and dignity. Meanwhile, Sarah has been overwhelmed by the generosity and has already started using some of the money to help others. She's paid off her student loans, helped her parents with their mortgage, and donated to several local charities. She's also started a scholarship fund for students from working-class families who want to pursue higher education. But more than that, Sarah has maintained her character despite her changed circumstances. She's still working as a waitress, even though she doesn't need to anymore, because she wants to stay connected to her roots and continue helping people in small ways every day. She's still the same kind, respectful person she was before, just with more resources to help others. Watching Sarah use the money to help others has validated my decision in ways I never expected. This is exactly what I had hoped Emily would do with her inheritance someday. I had dreamed of seeing my daughter use her advantages to lift others up, to make the world a better place. Instead, she had become someone who looked down on others and valued only superficial things. But here's what I want you to understand about this whole situation. I don't regret my decision, not for a single moment. Some people might think I'm being too harsh, that I should forgive Emily and give her another chance. But forgiveness doesn't mean pretending that someone's actions don't have consequences. I worked my entire life to build wealth that I thought would secure my family's future, but I realize now that I was focused on the wrong kind of security. I was trying to give Emily financial security, but I failed to give her the moral and emotional security that comes from knowing right from wrong. from valuing character over appearance, and from treating others with respect and kindness. The real tragedy in this story isn't that Emily lost her inheritance. The real tragedy is that somewhere along the way, I lost my daughter. Not because she died or moved away, but because she chose to become someone I couldn't recognize or respect. She chose to value the wrong things, to treat people poorly, and to see others as beneath her. I think about Margaret often, and I wonder what she would think about my decision. I believe she would be heartbroken about how Emily turned out, but I also believe she would understand why I did what I did. Margaret always said that our job as parents wasn't to make our children wealthy, but to make them good people. By that measure, we failed with Emily, but maybe we can still succeed with Sarah and the others who will benefit from this money. Some of you might be thinking that I'm being too harsh, that I should have given Emily more chances to change. But here's what you need to understand. I gave her 30 years of chances. I gave her every opportunity to learn and grow and become a better person. I modeled the values I wanted her to have. I showed her through my actions what it meant to work hard, to stay humble, and to treat others with respect. But at some point, you have to accept that people make their own choices. Emily chose to value appearances over character. She chose to be embarrassed by her father instead of proud of his accomplishments. She chose to treat a hard-working waitress with disdain instead of respect. These weren't mistakes or momentary lapses in judgment. These were choices that revealed her true character. I want you to think about this. What if Emily had responded differently that day in the restaurant? What if, instead of being embarrassed by my appearance, she had said something like, "Dad, you've worked so hard your whole life, and I'm proud of everything you've accomplished. I don't care what you wear, because I know who you are inside." Or what if she had defended me when I was being judged by others instead of joining in the judgment? If Emily had shown me that she understood the values I had tried to teach her, if she had demonstrated kindness and respect for others regardless of their appearance or social status, this story would have a very different ending. But she didn't. She chose to be someone I couldn't be proud of, someone who represented everything I had tried to teach her not to be. The truth is, I don't think Emily ever understood the sacrifices I made for her. She never understood that every hour I spent working, every dollar I saved, every opportunity I passed up was motivated by love for her. She saw only the results of my work, not the work itself. She saw only the wealth I had accumulated, not the character I had tried to build, and that's the real lesson here. Money without character is worthless. Wealth without values is meaningless. I can give someone millions of dollars, but if they don't have the character to use it well, it becomes a curse rather than a blessing. Sarah, on the other hand, has shown me what it looks like when someone with good character receives unexpected opportunity. She's been overwhelmed by the gift, but she's also been thoughtful about how to use it. She's considered the responsibility that comes with wealth, and she's already started using it to help others. This is what I had hoped Emily would do someday. This is the legacy I had dreamed of leaving through my daughter. But instead, I'm leaving it through someone who understands the value of hard work, the importance of treating others with respect, and the responsibility that comes with privilege. I know some of you are probably wondering if I've had any regrets, if I've questioned my decision in the months since that lunch. The answer is no. Every day, I see news about how Sarah is using the money to help others, and every day, I am more convinced that I made the right choice. But I also want you to understand that this decision came with a cost. I lost my daughter, not to death or disease, but to values that I couldn't accept. I lost the dream of having a family legacy, of seeing my grandchildren grow up knowing their grandfather, of having someone to carry on the values that Margaret and I tried to instill. That loss is real, and it hurts every single day. But it's a loss that Emily chose, not one that was forced upon her. She could have chosen differently at any point. She could have chosen to value character over appearance, love over money, and family over social status. But she didn't. I think about my own father sometimes, the coal miner who worked himself to death to provide for his family. He never had much money, but he had character. He treated everyone with respect, regardless of their social status or appearance. He taught me that a person's worth isn't measured by their bank account or their clothes, but by their actions and their character. My father would have been proud of the wealth I accumulated, but he would have been more proud of the decision I made in that restaurant. He would have understood that sometimes doing the right thing means making difficult choices, even when those choices hurt. And that's what I want to leave you with. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is to set boundaries, to refuse to enable bad behavior, and to stand up for your values even when it costs you something precious. Sometimes, love means saying no, even to the people you care about most. Emily will always be my daughter, and I will always love her. But love doesn't mean accepting unacceptable behavior. Love doesn't mean pretending that someone's actions don't have consequences. Love sometimes means making difficult decisions that you hope will eventually lead to growth and change. I don't know if Emily will ever understand why I made the decision I did. I don't know if she ever developed the character and values that I tried to teach her. but I know that I've given someone else the opportunity to use wealth in a way that makes the world a better place, and that gives me peace. The months since that fateful lunch have been both difficult and rewarding. Difficult because I've had to come to terms with the loss of my daughter, with the failure of my parenting, with the reality that money can't buy character or love. But rewarding because I've seen the good that can come from putting wealth in the right hands, from rewarding character over entitlement, from standing up for what's right even when it's painful. Sarah has become like a daughter to me, not because she's inheriting my money, but because she embodies the values I tried to teach Emily. She visits me regularly, not because she wants anything from me, but because she genuinely cares about my well-being. She listens to my stories about Margaret, about my childhood, about the lessons I've learned over the years. She's also introduced me to her family, and I've been struck by the similarities between her upbringing and mine. Her parents are honest people who taught their children the value of respect and kindness. Her father, the construction worker she mentioned that day in the restaurant, is exactly the kind of man I hope to be as a father. Someone who puts his family first, who works hard for what he has, and who treats everyone with dignity. Through Sarah, I've found the family connection I thought I had lost. Her parents have welcomed me into their lives, and I've been able to share some of my experiences and wisdom with them. It's not the same as having a relationship with my own daughter, but it's meaningful in its own way. Sarah has also kept her promise to use the money to help others. She's established a foundation that provides scholarships for students from working-class families, funds programs that help people develop job skills, and supports small businesses in underserved communities. She's become a champion for people who, like her, work hard but don't always have the opportunities they deserve. But perhaps most importantly, Sarah has maintained her humility and her values despite her changed circumstances. She still works part-time at the restaurant, not because she needs the money, but because she wants to stay connected to her roots and continue helping people in small ways every day. She's still the same kind, respectful person she was before, just with more resources to help others. This is the legacy I wanted to leave. Not just money, but values. Not just wealth, but character. Not just success, but the wisdom to use that success to help others. Sarah has shown me that this legacy is possible, that wealth can be a force for good when it's placed in the right hands. So to those of you who have been following this story, I want you to think about your own relationships, your own values, and your own choices. Are you treating others with respect regardless of their appearance or social status? Are you valuing character over superficial things? Are you using whatever advantages you have to help others rather than just to elevate yourself? And to those of you who are parents, I want you to think about what you're teaching your children, not just through your words but through your actions. Are you showing them that all people deserve respect? Are you demonstrating that character matters more than appearance? Are you modeling the values you want them to have? Because here's the truth, you can give your children every advantage in the world, but if you don't give them character, you've given them nothing of lasting value. You can leave them millions of dollars, but if you don't teach them how to use it responsibly, you've left them with a burden rather than a blessing. My story isn't just about a father who disinherited his daughter. It's about the importance of values, the power of character, and the responsibility that comes with privilege. It's about the difference between being wealthy and being worthy, between having money and having meaning. I made a choice that day in the restaurant, and I would make the same choice again. I chose to reward character over entitlement, kindness over cruelty, and values over appearances. I chose to support someone who understood the value of hard work and the importance of treating others with respect. And in making that choice, I honored the memory of my wife, the legacy of my father, and the values that have guided me throughout my life. I may have lost my daughter, but I kept my integrity. I may have given away my fortune, but I invested in something much more valuable, the character and future of someone who will use that wealth to make the world a better place. The ripple effects of that decision continue to spread. Sarah's foundation has already helped dozens of students attend college, supported numerous small businesses, and provided job training for hundreds of people. The money I earned through decades of hard work is now creating opportunities for others to succeed, to build their own legacies, to lift up their own families and communities. This is what wealth should do. It should create opportunities, not just for the wealthy, but for everyone. It should be a tool for building up society, not just for building up individual bank accounts. It should be a force for good, not just a source of personal comfort. Emily could have been part of this legacy. She could have used her inheritance to make a difference in the world, to help people who needed it, to create something meaningful and lasting. Instead, she chose to focus on appearances, on status, on the superficial things that fade away. But it's not too late for Emily to change. It's not too late for her to understand the lessons I tried to teach her, to develop the character she lacks, to become the person I always hoped she would be. The inheritance may be gone, but the opportunity for growth, for redemption, for becoming a better person is still there. I hope that someday Emily will understand why I made the decision I did. I hope that someday she realized that I didn't disinherit her out of anger or spite, but out of love. I hope that someday she'll see that I was trying to teach her something important about character, about values, about what really matters in life. But even if she never understands, even if she never changes, I know that I did the right thing. I know that I stood up for my values, that I rewarded character over entitlement, that I used my wealth to help someone who would use it wisely. What do you think about my decision? Do you think I was too harsh? Or do you think I did the right thing? Have you ever been in a situation where you had to choose between family loyalty and your values? Have you ever had to make a difficult decision that you knew was right, even though it would hurt someone you loved? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, because stories like this remind us all of what really matters in life. They remind us that character is more important than appearance, that kindness is more valuable than wealth, and that the legacy we leave behind is measured not by what we accumulate, but by how we treat others and what we do to make the world a better place. And remember, it's not about the money we accumulate, or the clothes we wear, or the status we achieve. It's about the kindness we show, the respect we give, and the character we build. Those are the things that truly matter, and those are the things that create a legacy worth leaving behind. So as you go about your day, as you interact with the people around you, remember Sarah and remember Emily. Remember that how you treat others, especially those who can't do anything for you, reveals who you really are. Remember that character matters more than appearances, that kindness is more valuable than wealth, and that the choices you make today will determine the legacy you leave tomorrow. Thank you for listening to my story, for thinking about these important questions, and for remembering that we all have the power to make a difference in the world. Not through what we have, but through who we are and how we treat others. That's the lesson I hope you take away from this painful but ultimately liberating experience. And that's the legacy I hope to leave behind.